Jack Miller had never been one to take big risks. His life was stable, maybe a little monotonous, but that's how he liked it. For years, he'd worked as a marketing specialist for a mid-sized company in New York, earning enough to pay the bills, keep his daughter Emily in a good public school, and maintain a quiet life since his wife had passed away 5 years earlier. Emily, now 7, was his entire world. Raising a child alone wasn't easy, but Jack made it a priority to always be present, even with the demands of his job. Everything changed within a matter of weeks. A coworker introduced Jack to online sports betting. At first, it was just a harmless hobby. He placed small bets on football and basketball games. When he won $200 in one round, he experienced a rush of excitement he had never felt before. The trouble began when he decided to up the stakes. He believed he could recover past losses, or maybe even save up some extra money for Emily's future. Before long, what had started as a pastime turned into an addiction. Jack lost everything on his last bet. He had drained his savings, his checking account, and every penny he had tucked away. The despair was overwhelming. As if that weren't enough, a week later, he was called into the office. The news was merciless but not surprising. The company was implementing an AI system to cut costs, and layoffs would begin in the marketing department. Jack was officially out of a job. With no income and no savings, Jack's finances crumbled fast. He was 2 months behind on rent, and his landlord showed no mercy. Jack and Emily were evicted, forced to leave the small apartment they had called home. Having already sold his car to cover gambling debts, all Jack had left was a camping tent he used to take on holiday trips when Emily was younger. He pitched it in a park, desperately trying to make it a temporary refuge. That first night in the tent was a harsh reality check for Jack. Even after losing almost everything, being there, in a public park with no privacy, security, or comfort, felt like rock bottom. Emily, however, tried to mask her own sadness to keep from worrying her dad. She was just a child, but the mature expression on her face, as she organized their few belongings, spoke volumes about the strength she managed to summon from somewhere deep inside. Mornings were the hardest. The crisp autumn air bit at their skin, and Emily's stomach growled loudly. She never complained, but Jack knew hunger was a constant companion. His top priority was ensuring she could still go to school. He made a promise to himself. Emily wouldn't pay for his mistakes any more than she already had. Every day, he walked her to the school entrance, holding her small hand with an almost reverent care. The school was her one safe haven, a place where she could still be a child, where she got a warm breakfast and a semblance of normalcy. While Emily was in school, Jack began his daily job hunt. He walked for hours, handing out resumes to local businesses and pleading with managers to give him a chance. The problem was that, with so many companies cutting costs, jobs were scarce. Rejections became increasingly frequent, some even humiliating. More than once, Jack was told his marketing experience was irrelevant in a world where machines could do it better. The nights brought a new kind of suffering. Jack stayed up late, watching over Emily as she slept and wrestling with his own thoughts. He replayed every wrong decision that had led him to this moment. Sometimes, he cried silently, careful not to let Emily notice, his mind haunted by a single question. What kind of future could she possibly have? Yet, even on the darkest nights, Emily seemed to find something to be grateful for. Once, she held her father's arm and said, "We still have each other. That's what matters." Jack tried to hold on to her words, but the weight of their struggles felt insurmountable. He knew that each day spent on the streets was leaving scars neither of them would be able to erase. Still, a spark of hope remained. He refused to give up entirely, even though he had no idea how to change their circumstances. Emily's school had become more than just a place to learn and make friends. It was now her main source of nourishment. Every morning, she arrived early to make sure she could get a decent breakfast. It was just enough to keep her feeling strong and focused during class, even if there was no guarantee of another meal later in the day. Her teachers noticed she had become quieter than usual, but since she was an exemplary student, they didn't raise too many questions. Meanwhile, Jack spent the hours Emily was in school tirelessly searching for work. He roamed the streets in the same worn-out shoes, carrying a handful of crumpled resumes in an old backpack. The shop windows he passed were a cruel reminder of everything he had lost, but they also served as a silent motivation to keep going. One day, during one of his long walks through downtown, Jack noticed something: a small restaurant with red brick walls and a weathered sign that seemed a bit busier than usual. As he approached, he saw an older man with gray hair and an apron stained with sauce chatting animatedly with a group of customers. The aroma of freshly prepared food made Jack's stomach twist with hunger. Despite his hesitation, Jack stepped inside, determined to ask if there was any opening, any job at all that might help him earn some money. Henry Carter, the owner of the restaurant, noticed Jack immediately. It wasn't hard to tell he was struggling. Jack's worn clothes and weary expression gave it away. But Henry had a habit of treating everyone with respect, and he did the same for Jack. After a brief conversation, Henry explained that, unfortunately, he didn't have any openings. He admitted he was barely keeping the restaurant afloat in the midst of the economic downturn. Jack thanked him and turned to leave, but before he could, Henry asked, "Have you eaten today?" Jack hesitated to answer, but Henry didn't wait. He brought over a steaming bowl of soup and a slice of bread, setting them in front of Jack without taking no for an answer. "Eat," Henry said firmly. "Nobody can think straight on an empty stomach." Jack was deeply moved but insisted he couldn't accept the food without giving something in return. That's when Henry said something that stuck in Jack's mind. "We don't always help expecting something in return. Sometimes we do it simply because it's the right thing to do." When Emily returned from school, Jack told her about Henry's kind gesture, and that night, he brought her the same piece of bread and a few cookies Henry had set aside for him. It wasn't much, but the gratitude on his daughter's face reignited something inside Jack. Maybe, just maybe, there was still enough kindness in the world to help him find a way back. Jack began visiting Henry's restaurant more often, always during the hours Emily was at school. It wasn't just for the food, though the bread and soup were a welcome relief during his exhausting job search. He went because he felt something rare in that place: humanity. Unlike the cold rejections he faced daily, Henry never made him feel like a burden. For Jack, that kind of compassion was priceless. Henry started to notice there was more to Jack than just the weary look of someone going through hard times. In occasional conversations, Jack would mention his background in marketing, but he did so without much enthusiasm. His self-esteem had taken such a hit that talking about his skills felt almost pointless. But Henry was a good listener. As he served Jack, he paid attention to the ideas that surfaced in the middle of Jack's stories about his previous work. Henry realized that, even though Jack was broken, he still had something valuable to offer. Henry, however, had his own struggles. The restaurant was emptier by the day. Even during what should have been peak hours, the tables remained unoccupied, and the clatter of the kitchen echoed in the silence. Most of the customers who did stop by were longtime regulars, coming more for friendship than for food. Henry confided in Jack that he didn't know how much longer he could keep the place open. The economic downturn had hit his business hard, and he was beginning to consider closing for good. "I thought after all these years in the business, nothing could knock me down," Henry said with a heavy sigh, gazing out the window at the slow-moving street. "But it feels like things have changed faster than I could keep up." Jack felt an urge to say something but held back. He wasn't sure it was appropriate to offer any suggestions, given his own circumstances. Yet, as he saw the despair on Henry's face, a thought began to take shape in his mind. Maybe he could help. It was a risky idea, especially since Jack had nothing to his name. But at the same time, the restaurant seemed like his last chance at starting over. Henry, for his part, had developed a quiet respect for Jack. Despite everything he was going through, Jack never asked for more than what Henry willingly offered. He was grateful and always made an effort to help with small tasks, like clearing trays or wiping down empty tables, even without being asked. This humble attitude led Henry to see something in Jack that others probably overlooked: resilience. That night, as Emily finished the last piece of bread Jack had brought home, he looked at her and made a decision. He knew the restaurant was his final opportunity to give her more than just survival. It was time to try, even if it meant risking the little dignity he had left. The next morning, Jack woke up with a strange feeling. It wasn't exactly hope, but a determination he hadn't felt in months. He knew he had to try even if he faced rejection. As he walked Emily to school, he rehearsed in his mind how he would approach Henry. Jack knew the restaurant owner was a generous man, but he also understood that asking for more help, even with good intentions, would be delicate. By late afternoon, Jack returned to the restaurant. Henry was behind the counter, mechanically wiping down plates, his expression heavy with fatigue. There weren't many customers, just a couple seated at a corner table. Jack waited for the right moment to approach, his heart pounding in his chest. "Henry," he began, his voice hesitant. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Henry looked up and smiled, though he looked tired. "Sure, Jack. What's on your mind?" Jack took a deep breath and started explaining. He talked about his marketing experience, how he had once worked on campaigns that helped businesses recover. For the first time in a long while, he spoke about his work with conviction. Then, he made his proposal. He wanted to help Henry attract more customers to the restaurant. In exchange, all he asked for was a place for him and Emily to stay for a week. Henry frowned, clearly surprised. "Jack, I appreciate your willingness to help, but are you sure about this? I mean, you've got so much on your plate already. And honestly, I'm not sure it will work. Things have been bad for a long time." Jack sensed Henry's hesitation but refused to give up. "Look, I can't guarantee it will work. But what I do know is that you have a great product. People love your food, Henry. Maybe they just need a reminder." He paused before continuing. "I'm not asking for money, just a chance. If I fail, at least I tried. But if it works, it could make all the difference for both of us." Henry stayed silent for a moment, considering Jack's words. He realized the risk to him was minimal. After all, the restaurant was already on the brink of collapse. And there was something in Jack's voice, a mix of honesty and desperation, that made Henry feel that saying no would be a mistake. "All right," Henry finally said. "You've got 1 week. And in the meantime, you and Emily can stay in the storage room. It's not very comfortable, but at least you'll have a roof over your heads." Jack could barely hide his relief. "Thank you, Henry. I promise I won't let you down." As Henry returned to his tasks, Jack began planning mentally. He had little time and even fewer resources, but he knew he had to make every minute count. This wasn't just about saving Henry's restaurant. It was about proving to himself and to Emily that he was still capable of rebuilding their lives. The storage room at the back of the restaurant was cramped, but for Jack and Emily, it was a sanctuary. Boxes were stacked in every corner, alongside bags of flour and coffee packages. Yet the space offered something they hadn't had in weeks: privacy and security. Henry provided an old mattress and some blankets for them to sleep on, and he made sure the kitchen was open so Jack could prepare something simple for Emily in the evenings. The next morning, Jack woke up early, more determined than ever. He began observing the restaurant with the eye of a strategist. The tables were well organized, but the space lacked a welcoming touch. The sign in front of the restaurant was outdated and faded, something that could easily discourage potential customers. The menu, though rich and varied, didn't stand out enough to catch the attention of passers-by. Jack knew he couldn't change everything at once, but he needed to start with something impactful. He asked Henry for permission to rearrange a few tables and place a small chalkboard at the entrance of the restaurant with inviting and witty messages. Henry was skeptical but agreed. "It's not going to change much, Jack," Henry remarked as he watched the new setup. but I'm curious to see what else you've got in mind. Jack also began working on a plan to draw attention in the neighborhood. He used the few dollars he had left to print simple flyers highlighting the restaurant's specialties, like Henry's famous beef stew and homemade cakes. He handed out the flyers personally, going from shop to shop and even stopping people on the street. Every conversation was an opportunity to tell the story of a restaurant that deserved to be visited. By the end of the day, Henry started noticing something he hadn't seen in a long time: the doorbell chiming more frequently. It wasn't a flood of customers, but it was enough to spark a glimmer of hope. Two couples sat down for dinner, drawn in by the chalkboard outside. A young woman ordered a slice of cake, mentioning that she'd seen Jack handing out flyers and decided to give the place a try. Meanwhile, Emily, who spent her afternoons at the restaurant after school, helped with small tasks like folding napkins or organizing menus on the tables. Her infectious energy even made the few customers smile. Jack realized that, despite all the hardships, they were building something together. That night, as Emily slept soundly on the makeshift mattress, Jack sat on the floor of the storage room with a piece of paper and a pen. He jotted down new ideas, brainstorming ways to attract more customers. He knew this was just the beginning, but the small wins of the day were enough to reignite his confidence. The following days were a mix of small victories and significant challenges. Jack continued handing out flyers and tweaking details around the restaurant, but business remained inconsistent. At times, the dining room seemed to come alive. At others, it returned to its emptiness. Henry watched everything with a mix of curiosity and doubt. He appreciated Jack's effort but struggled to see how these small changes could be enough to save the business. "You're doing what you can, Jack," Henry said during a moment of frustration. "But I'm not sure it's going to be enough. I've got debts piling up, and the banks aren't forgiving." The pressure Henry was feeling was understandable, and Jack knew he needed a bigger idea, something that would truly make an impact. He spent the night awake, poring over the menus and recalling everything he knew about marketing strategies. In the quiet of the storage room, with Emily sleeping beside him, inspiration struck: a themed night. The next morning, Jack shared his idea with Henry. "You have recipes that tell stories, dishes no one else makes quite like you. Let's turn that into a unique experience. A homemade flavors night, where people can sample your specialties while hearing your story. We can promote it on social media and spread flyers around the neighborhood. All we need is one night to prove it's worth it." Henry seemed skeptical, but something about Jack's determination convinced him. "If this is what you want to try, then let's do it. But I don't have money to spend on advertising or extra ingredients." Jack assured him it wouldn't require much expense. He took simple photos of the dishes himself and started promoting the event on social media. He created posts emphasizing the idea of a special dinner filled with food made with love and tradition. The messages were heartfelt and direct, appealing to the community spirit. Jack also encouraged customers who came by the restaurant to spread the word to their friends and families. In the days leading up to the themed night, Jack and Emily worked tirelessly. Jack decorated the restaurant with simple lights and a few old items he found stored in the back. Emily created drawings for the tables, adding a personal and authentic touch to the atmosphere. Even Henry, who had initially been hesitant, started to feel a sense of excitement. He reviewed his recipes, preparing each dish with the care of someone who knew his survival depended on it. When the night arrived, Jack felt the weight of the moment. It was all or nothing. As the hours passed, he began to see familiar faces entering the restaurant, people who had received flyers, seen the posts, or heard about the event. Some brought friends, while others came out of curiosity. The restaurant was nearly full, something that hadn't happened in months. Henry was in the kitchen, sweating but smiling. Every dish that left the kitchen was met with compliments, and Jack made it a point to move from table to table, chatting with customers and gathering their feedback. Emily, with her contagious energy, helped serve smaller plates, earning smiles and even a few tips. For the first time in what felt like forever, the restaurant was alive. At the end of the night, Henry sat at one of the empty tables, exhausted but with a look of relief. "I don't know how you did it, Jack, but this was the best night we've had in a long time." Jack knew there was still a lot of work ahead, but in that moment, he felt they were on the right path. The success of the Homemade Flavors night brought an energy to the restaurant that hadn't been felt in ages. In the following days, Henry noticed that some of the people who attended the event began returning, often bringing friends or family with them. The atmosphere in the restaurant seemed more vibrant, as if that small spark of hope had ignited something greater. Jack, however, wasn't satisfied. He knew this was just the beginning and that they couldn't rely on a single event to keep the restaurant afloat. Determined to build on their momentum, he began studying the flow of activity in the neighborhood. He noticed that many workers from nearby shops and offices had tight schedules and preferred quick meals, which led him to propose a new idea to Henry: a special lunch menu with lighter options, affordable prices, and fast preparation. "Henry," Jack began, showing him a draft of his idea, "we can attract a different crowd by offering something practical for the workers around here. A promotion that combines flavor with efficiency. We could call it Henry's Quick Lunch." Henry read through the draft carefully. "I never thought about changing things up this much, but you might be right. We're bringing in customers at night, but the afternoons are still dead. Let's give it a shot." Jack created more flyers, but this time he focused on nearby businesses and offices. He also teamed up with Emily, whose natural charm could convince anyone. Together, they handed out flyers in the busiest spots around the area, and Jack spoke with managers and receptionists, offering group discounts for those who dined at the restaurant. During the first week, the response was modest but enough to keep Henry optimistic. The new menu items, fresh salads, gourmet sandwiches, and quick soups, began to catch attention. More importantly, Jack noticed that many of the new customers commented on Henry's warm personality and the welcoming energy of the restaurant, something Jack started to emphasize as a unique selling point. However, not everything went smoothly. An anonymous online review criticized the restaurant for trying to reinvent itself too quickly, accusing it of sacrificing quality for quantity. The comment hit Henry hard. He grew tense, worried that their efforts to change were undermining what made the restaurant special. "Jack, I think we're moving too fast," Henry confessed, clutching the newspaper where the critique had been published. "I don't want to lose what makes this place unique." Jack listened calmly. He knew criticism was inevitable, but he also understood Henry's concern. "Henry, what makes this place special isn't just the food. It's you. It's the way you treat people, the way you treated Emily and me. Let's use that to our advantage. This isn't about abandoning your roots. It's about showcasing what you already do best in a new way." Jack's words brought Henry some relief, and together they decided to use social media to respond to the criticism positively. Jack wrote an emotional post about the restaurant, highlighting the stories behind each dish and Henry's dedication to maintaining quality even during tough times. The post went locally viral, drawing curious new customers eager to experience the heart behind the restaurant. That evening, as they closed the register, Henry looked at Jack and said, "You're right. It doesn't matter what people say, as long as we're doing the best we can." As the weeks passed, Jack began to notice something different about how people looked at him. At first, he was just a man on the margins, someone handing out flyers with hope written all over his face. Now, he was recognized as that guy from Henry's restaurant, the man helping turn a small business into a cozy neighborhood hub. This shift brought unexpected opportunities. One day, while Jack was picking up basic groceries at a discount store, a man approached him and called him by name. It was Sam, the owner of a small print shop. Sam had attended the Homemade Flavors night and remembered Jack's warm approach. "Jack," Sam said, shaking his hand, "I was impressed with what you did at the restaurant. My business is struggling too. Do you think you'd have time to look at my marketing? I can't pay much, but I'd really value your help." Jack was surprised by the proposal, but something stirred within him. Maybe he could turn this into something more than just a fleeting opportunity. He accepted the invitation and went to Sam's print shop that same day. There, he found a familiar scene: outdated equipment, unmotivated employees, and a lack of customer traffic. After a few hours of conversation, Jack sketched out simple ideas to revitalize the business, starting with a stronger social media presence and promotions aimed at local companies. Meanwhile, Henry's restaurant continued to thrive. Emily had become almost a mascot for the place, with customers bringing small gifts for the little girl who had charmed them all. Henry, now more confident, even began considering small investments in the restaurant, like updating the sign or expanding the dessert menu. But the growing popularity brought new challenges. A larger, more modern restaurant opened just a few blocks away, offering sophisticated dishes at low prices. Many customers started dividing their attention between the two establishments, which worried Henry. Jack, however, saw it as an opportunity to reinforce the restaurant's values. He launched a campaign called "Where Everyone is Welcome," emphasizing the human connection and warmth of Henry's place, something no competitor could replicate. The strategy worked, but the pressure on Jack was mounting. He was now dividing his time between helping Henry and working with Sam, while also trying to find moments to spend with Emily. Despite her resilience, she missed having quality time with her dad. Jack began to realize that, even though he was fighting to turn their lives around, he needed to balance his priorities better. One evening, as Emily sat at the counter in the restaurant drawing, she asked, "Daddy, do you think we'll ever have a house again? With a yard and a swing?" Jack felt a pang in his chest but smiled at his daughter. "I promise we're getting there. One step at a time, sweetheart." Jack's days became a constant race against the clock. In the mornings, he worked with Henry at the restaurant, crafting new campaigns and tweaking the space to keep customers coming back. In the afternoons, he spent a few hours at Sam's print shop, implementing ideas that were beginning to yield positive results. In the evenings, he returned to the restaurant to prepare for the next day and ensure Emily was settled before bed. But the relentless pace began to take its toll. Jack often arrived at the storage room exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open to talk with Emily. He knew he was giving everything he had, but he also felt that his relationship with his daughter was slipping into the background. Emily, for her part, never complained. She seemed to understand that her father was doing everything he could to give them a better life. Yet, there were moments when she sat alone in the storage room, taking one of her drawings and writing little notes in the corners, like, "I love you, Daddy," or "You're my hero." Jack would find these notes at the most unexpected times, and they gave him the strength to keep going, even when he felt completely drained. One day, after closing up shop, Jack opened up to Henry. "I feel like I'm being pulled in every direction, and at the same time, I'm not really getting anywhere. The restaurant is doing well, the print shop is improving, but my daughter deserves more from me. I feel like I'm failing her." Henry listened carefully, reflecting for a moment before responding. "Jack, I spent years putting my work above everything else. I thought that was what would make me happy. But you know what I realized? No success in the world is worth it if you can't share it with the people you love. Maybe you need to slow down and remember why you started all this." Henry's words echoed in Jack's mind. He knew the advice made sense, but slowing down felt impossible. So many people were counting on him now: Henry, Sam, and most importantly, Emily. That night, as Emily slept, Jack sat watching her, recalling all the moments when she had been his strength during the hardest times. He realized that even though they didn't yet have a house with a yard or a swing, what Emily needed most was him. Jack promised himself he would find a way to balance things better. The next day, he made a decision. He reduced the time he spent at the print shop, delegating some tasks to Sam and trusting the foundation they had built together. He also asked Henry for a more flexible schedule so he could spend afternoons with Emily. Henry, ever understanding, agreed without hesitation. The change made all the difference. Jack began taking Emily to the park after school and even resumed helping her with her homework, something she absolutely loved. These moments, though simple, restored the bond they had both feared was slipping away. The shift in Jack's pace brought more than emotional relief. It brought clarity. He realized he had been shouldering the pressure to fix everything on his own. By delegating and prioritizing, he saw that progress was possible without sacrificing what truly mattered. Emily blossomed with the extra attention, and her lively energy seemed to lift the spirits of the restaurant's customers as well. With more time to reflect, Jack began thinking about his own journey. He remembered what he loved about working in marketing, the challenge of creating connections and transforming stories into something that resonated with people. This sparked new ideas for Henry's restaurant. One evening, Jack proposed something different to Henry. "What do you think about hosting a community event? A small festival here at the restaurant with live music and special dishes. We could invite local artists, and maybe even set up an area where Emily and other kids can draw. It'd be a way to attract more people and strengthen the sense of community." Henry stayed quiet for a moment, processing the idea. "That sounds big, Jack. I like it, but do you think we can pull it off?" Jack smiled. "We can. We just need a clear plan and help from everyone who believes in this place." In the following days, Jack dove into planning the event. He brought together local shop owners to discuss partnerships, organized a social media campaign, and even convinced a musician who often performed in the town square to play at the festival. Henry, initially hesitant, was amazed at how Jack took charge, as if he was exactly where he was meant to be. The event was scheduled for a sunny Saturday, and from early in the morning, the restaurant was buzzing with activity. Jack and Emily arrived early to finish setting up the final details. Emily was beaming, wearing an apron that was slightly too big, but that she insisted on wearing to feel like part of the team. As the first guests began to arrive, Jack felt a wave of nervousness but also pride. The outdoor tables quickly filled up, and the sound of live music created a vibrant atmosphere. Emily led the other children in the drawing area, while Jack made it a point to greet every person who walked in. The event was an absolute success. The restaurant not only made record profits, but the entire neighborhood seemed revitalized. At the end of the day, an emotional Henry thanked Jack. "You brought more than customers, Jack. You brought life back to this place." "I don't know how to thank you," Jack, exhausted but happy, replied humbly. "You've done more for me than I could ever ask, Henry. This is just the beginning." That night, as Jack tucked Emily into bed, she held his hand and said, "Today was the best day ever, Daddy. I knew you could do it." The community festival marked a turning point not just for Henry's restaurant, but for Jack's life as well. In the days that followed, the event became the main topic of conversation in the neighborhood. Small shop owners who had participated reported an increase in foot traffic, and families who had never visited the restaurant began returning regularly, drawn by the welcoming atmosphere they had experienced during the event. With the festival's success, Henry started seeing Jack not just as someone helping out, but as a true partner. He surprised Jack with a proposal, a share of the restaurant's profits. "You've earned this, Jack," Henry said sincerely. "This place wouldn't be what it is now without you. Think of it as a step toward building something solid for you and Emily." Jack was deeply moved but knew he had even more to achieve. He accepted the offer, but on one condition. He wanted to continue helping other local businesses rebuild, just as he had done for Henry. This decision brought new opportunities almost immediately. A coffee shop owner who had attended the festival reached out, asking for help revitalizing his business. Jack began working with him on a flexible schedule, ensuring he could still honor his commitments to Henry and spend time with Emily. Meanwhile, Jack's reputation grew. A small article in the local newspaper highlighted the impact he was making in the community, calling him the man who transforms businesses with heart and creativity. The recognition drew attention from other local business owners, and within weeks, Jack had a waiting list of clients eager for his help. Despite the influx of new opportunities, Jack remained focused. He knew his priority was Emily and didn't want to fall into the trap of overworking and neglecting what truly mattered. To strike a balance, he began teaching other business owners how to implement simple strategies, empowering them instead of taking on all the work himself. This approach not only expanded his reach but also gave him more time with his daughter. One day, while walking with Emily in the park, Jack was approached by a well-dressed woman who introduced herself as the manager of a renowned restaurant group in the city. She had heard about his work and wanted to hire him to lead a larger-scale marketing campaign. Jack was taken aback but politely thanked her and asked for some time to think it over. That night, he discussed the offer with Henry, who encouraged him. "You've got talent, Jack, but never forget what brought you here. Your daughter and your humanity. As long as you keep that in your heart, you can achieve anything." Jack knew the decision wasn't just about the job offer, but about maintaining the balance he had fought so hard to achieve. Jack spent the week reflecting on the restaurant group manager's proposal. The opportunity seemed like a clear path to the financial stability he had longed for. But on the other hand, he knew accepting the job might mean giving up the control he had regained over his routine and the precious time he was now dedicating to Emily. On a quiet evening, as Emily sat drawing beside him in the restaurant's storage room, Jack decided to include her in the decision. "Emmy," he began, using the affectionate nickname she loved, "someone important offered me a big job that could help us a lot. But if I take it, I might have to spend more time away from you. What do you think?" Emily stopped drawing and looked at her father with a mix of curiosity and maturity. "Daddy, you always do what's best for me. But I think if it's going to make you tired again, maybe it's not so good." Her words struck Jack like a lightning bolt of clarity. He realized he had been so focused on securing the future that he nearly forgot about the present he had worked so hard to build. The next day, Jack contacted the restaurant group manager, thanked her for the opportunity, but explained that he couldn't accept it at that time. He felt the weight of making a tough decision but also the peace of knowing he chose what was best for himself and Emily. With his decision made, Jack doubled down on his commitment to supporting local businesses. He realized his true talent wasn't just in marketing but in inspiring people to believe in their own potential. He launched a series of free workshops where local entrepreneurs could learn simple, effective strategies to boost their businesses. The workshops were held at Henry's restaurant, transforming it into a hub for the community. The impact was greater than Jack could have imagined. Merchants who had been on the verge of closing began reporting significant improvements. The workshops not only strengthened individual businesses but also united people around a greater cause, revitalizing the neighborhood as a whole. Emily, always by her father's side, became an integral part of these initiatives. During the workshops, she made thank-you cards for participants or created small posters to decorate the space. Her presence charmed everyone, reinforcing the sense of community Jack worked so hard to foster. Over time, Henry's restaurant thrived consistently, and Jack began to see tangible rewards for his efforts. He was finally able to rent a small apartment, modest but comfortable, where Emily had her own room at last. On moving day, she ran through the empty space, laughing as she planned where to put her toys. Jack watched her with tears in his eyes, feeling that he was finally giving his daughter the stability she deserved. The new routine in the apartment brought meaningful changes for both Jack and Emily. Though the space was small, it felt enormous to them. Emily decorated her room with colorful drawings and a small shelf Jack had built for her favorite books. She spent hours playing with her dolls, something she hadn't done since their days in their old apartment. Jack, meanwhile, used the quiet evenings to plan his next steps, determined to ensure they would never face the hardships they had endured again. However, as Jack's visibility in the community grew, so did new challenges. Some business owners began questioning why he offered his services at such low prices or, in the case of the workshops, for free. "You're undervaluing our market," one commented during a local merchants' meeting. Jack listened calmly and responded with sincerity. My goal has never been to compete or take anything from anyone. I'm trying to give back to the community that supported me when I needed it most. Everyone's success here isn't a threat. It's a victory for the entire neighborhood. Jack's words won over some and left others skeptical, but he didn't let it deter him. He stayed focused on his work, trusting that his actions would speak louder than words. Over time, even the most critical voices began to acknowledge the positive impact of his efforts, especially as the neighborhood's transformation became undeniable. Shops reopening, bustling restaurants, and a more united community. One day, as Jack was wrapping up a workshop at Henry's restaurant, he received an unexpected phone call. It was a reporter from a local news station who wanted to feature his story. "Someone told me about your journey, and I think it deserves to be shared," the reporter said. Jack hesitated. The idea of exposing his life and the struggles he had faced made him uncomfortable. He consulted Henry, who encouraged him. "Jack, your story could inspire so many people. Think about how many lives you could touch beyond our neighborhood." Jack agreed to the interview but insisted on focusing on what he was building now, rather than dwelling on the struggles of his past. When the segment aired, it moved many viewers. It showed Jack handing out flyers, organizing workshops, and, most importantly, spending time with Emily, who shone brightly as she talked about how proud she was of her dad. The launch of Jack's consulting firm was a small but meaningful event, held at Henry's restaurant. Local business owners, friends, and even some regular customers attended, celebrating this new chapter in Jack's life. Emily, wearing a blue dress she had proudly picked out for the occasion, handed out thank you cards she had designed herself. Though the future still held uncertainties, Jack felt a confidence he hadn't experienced in years. He knew he was building something not just for himself, but for Emily and the community that had embraced him when he needed it most. The first year of Roots and Wings marketing was challenging but also transformative. Jack poured himself into every client project with the same passion that had brought him this far, ensuring each collaboration felt like a true partnership. Small businesses began to thrive, and the impact of his work extended beyond profits. It brought hope to a community that once seemed forgotten. Emily blossomed during this new chapter of their lives. For her 8th birthday, Jack organized a party in the park, something that had once felt impossible. Henry attended, along with Sam and other friends Jack had made along the way. Watching Emily run and laugh with the other children, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had hit rock bottom, but now he was surrounded by people who believed in him and by a daughter who had always kept him grounded. Over time, Jack's consulting firm began to attract attention beyond the local community. Business owners from neighboring towns sought his services, impressed by the results he achieved without compromising the values he stood for. However, Jack remained careful not to lose the balance he had worked so hard to achieve. Every new client was evaluated against 2 criteria: the potential impact of the work and the time it would allow him to dedicate to Emily. One day, Jack received an unexpected letter. It was from a national organization that supported struggling entrepreneurs, inviting him to share his story at an event that would bring together leaders and business owners from across the country. Jack hesitated. He had never thought of himself as someone who could inspire beyond his small circle. But once again, Henry encouraged him. "Jack, your story isn't just yours. It belongs to everyone who needs a reason to keep fighting. Go and show them that starting over is possible." With Emily's help, she insisted on choosing the tie he would wear. Jack took the stage that evening to share his journey. He spoke with raw honesty, recounting the days when he had lost everything and the moment he realized that his love for his daughter and the kindness of strangers were the most powerful forces for starting anew. When he finished, the room was silent for a few moments before erupting into applause. The event's impact was greater than Jack could have imagined. In addition to gaining new clients, he received messages from people who saw themselves in his story and now felt hopeful about overcoming their own challenges. The experience inspired Jack to expand his consulting firm to include workshops not just for businesses, but for individuals looking to rebuild their lives. On an ordinary day, while Jack was helping Emily decorate her room with colorful lights, she suddenly stopped and hugged him tightly. "I knew you'd do it, Daddy. I always knew." Jack smiled, feeling tears of happiness well up in his eyes. "I only made it because I had you by my side, sweetheart." Henry's restaurant, Sam's print shop, and the many other businesses Jack had helped along the way continued to thrive. But Jack's greatest success wasn't in the numbers. It was in knowing that he had found his purpose and built a life of dignity for himself and Emily. In the end, Jack didn't just regain everything he had lost. He discovered something even more valuable: the power to start over, to find strength in the darkest moments, and to turn challenges into opportunities. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment to share your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more inspiring videos.